No one wanted to breastfeed a baby abandoned at the maternity hospital. But the moment Alice held him in her arms, her life changed forever. The summer heat wrapped around Harpersville. The asphalt melted underfoot, and the air rippled above the scorching rooftops of single-story houses. In a small kitchen on the outskirts of town, filled with the smells of stewed beef and homemade pickles, there was a tense silence. Alice sat at the table, staring at the worn floorboards she used to scrub every Saturday as a child. Her old battered suitcase stood by the door like a silent witness to her defeat. "How could you let this happen to yourself?" Aunt Caroline's voice lashed out like a whip. She loomed over her niece, the wrinkles on her face deepening with anger. The dim light bulb under its faded lampshade cast sharp shadows on the walls, lined with jars of pickles standing like soldiers on guard. "You pathetic fool. Who's going to take you now with a baby? How do you plan to raise it? Don't you dare count on me, you hear?" Caroline scrubbed a clean plate with furious energy, as if trying to wipe away even the thought of this disgrace. "I raised you on my own, and now I have to feed your child too? My pension barely covers anything. That's enough for me. Pack your things and be out of here by tonight." Each word struck Alice like a blow, destroying the last bit of support she had left. Her throat tightened with hurt, but no tears came. She had cried them all out on the road, in the old rattling bus that carried her back to Harpersville, with her teaching diploma and her 2-month pregnancy. She had returned to the town she once called home, only to find cold calculation instead of warmth. If only Mom were still alive, the thought pierced her heart like an icy needle. Her mother's delicate face, faded in an old photograph, was like an icon of a lost paradise. She never knew her father, only heard from Caroline that he went off to find work and disappeared. Her mother died 15 years ago on a crosswalk when the drunk director of the local distillery hit her, throwing her body 10 meters. After the funeral, little Alice, terrified and clutching her small bundle of belongings, was nearly sent to an orphanage. But Caroline, her mother's third cousin, unexpectedly stepped in. Her house on the edge of Harpersville and her job as a warehouse clerk at the canning factory allowed her to become Alice's guardian. Alice never went hungry, always wore clean clothes, and learned how to run a household early on. But there was never any warmth in Caroline's home. What mattered was that Alice studied hard, graduated high school with honors, and got into a teacher's college. Her college years flew by in a blur of lectures, exams, and friendly gatherings. After her final state exams, she returned to Harpersville. But coming back brought no joy. Caroline, having vented her anger, calmed down slightly. "Get out of my sight," she spat as a final blow. Without a word, Alice grabbed her suitcase and walked out the gate. Stunned, she couldn't believe she had come back only to be humiliated and rejected, with the barely noticeable curve of her belly showing her secret. The principle of better a bit of truth, drilled into her since childhood, had made her confess to her aunt right away. But there was nothing to hope for. Now she urgently needed to find a place to live. She wandered through the familiar streets, oblivious to the life bubbling around her. Apples ripened in the yards, pears turned golden, plums glistened in the sun. From behind fences came the smell of boiling jam. Alice stopped near one house where a woman was busy at an outdoor kitchen. "Ma'am, could I have some water?" she asked, gathering her courage. Grace, a sturdy woman in her 50s, turned at the sound of her voice and studied the stranger carefully. Her strong frame and kind eyes inspired trust. "Come on in," she smiled, scooping up a mug of cool water from a bucket. Alice accepted the mug gratefully, sat down on a bench by the gate, and drank deeply. The refreshing water washed away some of the bitterness in her soul. "Can I sit here for a while? The heat is unbearable," she asked. "Of course, sweetie. You're not from around here, are you? I see you've got a suitcase. I just finished teacher's college. I want to work at a school here. But I'm having trouble finding a place to stay. Do you know anyone who rents a room cheaply?" Grace peered at her intently. "Well, you can stay with me. I'd like the company anyway, living alone gets lonely. I won't charge much, just pay on time." If that works for you, come on, I'll show you your room. Inside, Grace was glad for a chance to earn a bit of extra money. In Harpersville, cut off from the regional center by hundreds of miles, it was hard to find side work. Besides, her son had long moved away and only visited once or twice a year. The thought of spending long evenings alone depressed her. Alice, barely believing her luck, hurried after Grace, clutching her suitcase tight. The room was small but cozy. A wooden-framed window looked out over a shady garden full of ripening apples. There was an old wardrobe, a bed with crisp linens, and a small table, all carrying the scent of the past. Alice ran her hand over the coverlet and closed her eyes for a moment. This was her little island of hope in an ocean of despair. "Make yourself at home," Grace said softly, smiling. "Rest from your trip. I'll put the kettle on. You must be hungry." There was so much care in her voice that Alice almost cried. They quickly agreed on rent, a laughable sum by city standards but significant for Alice. She changed clothes and, feeling a little stronger, headed off to the district education office. Thus began a new chapter of her life, anxious, uncertain, but at least it postponed complete collapse. The education office was in an old building with peeling plaster, where the hallways smelled of glue and dusty folders. Clutching her teaching diploma, Alice waited her turn outside the director's office, torn between anxiety and determination. Without a job, she wouldn't be able to pay Grace, and without money she wouldn't last a month, especially with a baby on the way. The director, Deborah Miller, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a severe hairstyle, flipped through Alice's documents with clear skepticism. Her thin-framed glasses glinted under the light of the desk lamp. "Alice," Deborah began, setting down the diploma, "your grades are excellent, that's commendable. But you have no experience. Even though this is a rural school, it's a huge responsibility. The kids are all different, and the parents can be demanding. How do you plan to handle that?" Alice felt her cheeks flush. She had expected this question, but it still hit her like a blast of cold wind. "I know I don't have any experience," her voice trembled, but she straightened her back, trying to look confident. "But I didn't study just to get a diploma. I love literature, I love children. I'm ready to work hard, to learn, to do whatever it takes. Please give me a chance, Deborah. I won't let you down." Deborah tapped her pencil on the desk, studying Alice for what felt like forever. Finally, she sighed. "We are short on teachers. Russian language and literature are important subjects. The last teacher quit before summer." But with no experience, she shook her head. "All right, there's one option. There's a school out past Harpersville that needs a substitute. Small classes, but the kids are tough, and the parents, well, country folks have their own ways. Are you willing to try?" Alice nodded without hesitation. This wasn't just a chance, it was a lifeline. "I'll do it. When do I start?" "Come to the school tomorrow and meet the principal. But keep in mind, Alice, this isn't a city school. If you can't handle it, you won't last long." Alice walked out of the office feeling her legs shake with relief and fear. She knew this was going to be a test, but she had no other choice. When she got back to Grace's, she told her about the meeting. Grace poured them mint tea and nodded approvingly. "Good for you for not backing down. A school job is a good start. You'll settle in soon enough. Just hang in there, sweetheart." In the evenings, Alice spent time at Grace's house. They often sat in the gazebo covered with wild grapevines, sipping mint tea. The southern autumn was in no hurry to arrive, giving them warm evenings through mid-October. Gradually, Alice and Grace grew close. One night, with cicadas buzzing all around them, Alice finally told her story. In her second year of college, she fell in love with Matthew, a handsome guy and the only son of 2 college professors. His parents were ambitious and strict, planning out his future with German precision, studies, graduate school, and academic career. Matthew was smart and charismatic, popular with the girls. But he chose quiet Alice, maybe for her shy smile, or maybe for the inner strength that helped her survive life's blows. Their relationship felt like breathing together. Alice dreamed of a life with Matthew, full of happiness and understanding. But that spring, everything collapsed. She remembered that morning in the dorm vividly, how nausea pulled her out of bed, the smell of coffee from her roommate's room, the cold shower, the pharmacy across the street. 2 bright pink lines appeared on the test stick. Alice stared at them in shock, rereading the instructions, hoping she was wrong. But there was no mistake, she was pregnant. At first, Matthew promised they would handle it. But under pressure from his parents, he changed his mind. He brought her to his house, but his family greeted her with icy stares and thinly veiled contempt. 3 days later, he came to her dorm, pale and exhausted, and put an envelope of money on the table before walking away. "I'm sorry, I just can't," his voice shook, but he didn't look back. "They said it would ruin my life. And yours too." Alice clutched the bedsheet, realizing their love was over. All that remained was the child growing inside her and that envelope, a cold, material evaluation of their 4 years together. Abortion never crossed her mind. That tiny life had become part of her, her only hope. When Grace heard her story, she put an arm around Alice's shoulders. "Life throws all kinds of things at us, honey. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. You did the right thing keeping the baby. He'll be your comfort. And who knows, maybe life will turn out for the better." At the mention of Matthew, Alice flinched. The humiliation cut too deep. She could never forget how easily he gave her up. By February, Alice had to leave work. Her belly showed, even under her loose sweaters, and her legs ached with fatigue. The principal, an older but kind woman, promised to hold her job until the fall. "You're a good teacher, Alice," she said. "And times are tough. Who among us is without sin?" The last weeks before the birth dragged on slowly. Alice moved heavily, and her dreams were filled with worry, endless hallways, a baby with Matthew's face, an empty school. She waited for her son with a mix of fear and longing. Matthew's money would get her through the first little while, but prices kept going up, and she counted her bills with growing dread. On the last Saturday of February, as the rare Harpersville snow melted under the southern sun, her contractions began. Grace wasted no time, packed her bag, and flagged down a neighbor driving an old pickup truck. "Breathe, sweetheart, just like they taught you," she kept saying as they drove to the hospital. "You'll be a mama soon, honey." The birth went surprisingly easily. That evening, Alice held her son in her arms, a sturdy little boy with dark fuzz on his head and tiny clenched fists. "Ethan, my little Ethan," she whispered, stroking his velvety cheek. "We'll be okay, baby. We'll make it, I promise." In the maternity ward, Alice shared her room with 3 other women. It was amazing how quickly a sense of solidarity formed between them. By the evening of the first day, they already knew each other's stories, swapping tips on baby care and local gossip. "Did you hear the news?" asked a plump woman from the next bed, rocking her baby. "A factory worker's wife left him and their newborn daughter. Left a note saying she wasn't ready to be a mom." "Can you believe that?" "What about the baby?" another woman cut in. "They're feeding her formula, but the nurse says breast milk would be better." That evening, during feeding time, a nurse peeked into their room holding a tiny pink bundle. "Ladies, is anyone willing to breastfeed this little girl?" she asked softly, her voice pleading. "She's so weak, and formula just isn't working. The pediatrician says she won't make it without breast milk." The other women stayed silent, looking away. Some didn't have enough milk, others said they had colds. In the quiet, Alice's voice rang out. "Give her to me. I'll feed her." She didn't even understand where this sudden determination came from. Maybe it was the rush of breast milk filling her chest. Or maybe it was the thought that this tiny girl, like her once, had been abandoned. Alice gently laid sleeping Ethan down on a blanket and reached out for the bundle. "Oh, she's so fair," she whispered, studying the tiny face. "Why is she so pale?" "She was born early, and she's very weak," the nurse sighed. "When her mother found out it was a girl and not a boy, she started screaming. Then she just disappeared. I'll call her Sophia, Alice said, bringing the baby to her breast. Compared to strong little Ethan, Sophia felt like a porcelain doll, weightless, fragile. See how weak she is, the nurse said, shaking her head, though hope flickered in her eyes. You're amazing, Alice. Not everyone would do this. From that day on, Alice began feeding both babies. She had enough milk, as if her body understood it needed to save not only her son, but someone else's daughter too. On the third day, something happened that changed how Alice saw her life's path. The head nurse came into the room wearing a formal expression. Alice, you have a visitor. The baby girl's father wants to meet you. Alice instinctively smoothed her hair and hospital gown. Her throat felt dry. Who was this man whose daughter she was feeding? Was he angry with his wife? What would he say to her? Standing in the doorway was a man in his 30s, average height, fit, wearing the crisp uniform of a Coast Guard officer. His clean-shaven face, short sandy hair, and piercing blue eyes all showed deep worry. I'm James Parker, commander at the local Coast Guard station. His voice was a little rough. He awkwardly bumped into a vase of daisies Grace had brought, almost knocking it over. That clumsy moment made him seem more human, more real. Alice, she replied, suddenly realizing she didn't even know her own patronymic. Her birth certificate simply said unknown. They told me you agreed to feed my Sophia, he paused, searching for words. Is that what you're calling her? Yes, I call her Sophia, Alice said. I don't know what name you had chosen. That's a beautiful name, he said quickly. Sophia Parker. It sounds perfect. There was something so genuine in his eyes that Alice couldn't help but smile. He told her that his wife had abandoned Sophia, refusing to be a mother. James started coming every day, bringing fruits, juices, even a stuffed bear for Ethan so he wouldn't feel left out. His care for both children touched Alice, but after what Matthew did, she was afraid to trust anyone again. By the fourth day after giving birth, the maternity ward, filled with the smells of antiseptic and baby soap, had become Alice's refuge from the world. Yet even there, surrounded by women's solidarity, she felt vulnerable. Her decision to feed Sophia caused whispers among the other mothers. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with judgment, as if she was taking on someone else's burden while forgetting her own. Alice tried to ignore their looks, but each whisper stung. That day, James walked in holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. His uniform fit perfectly, but his face showed exhaustion and worry. He paused awkwardly by the door. Alice, he began, fiddling with his hat, I know this might sound strange, but I want to ask you something. Do you have anywhere to go after you're discharged? Alice froze, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected that question, and the silence that followed felt heavy, like sea fog. Every eye in the room turned to her. The nurses, the mothers, even the babies seemed to go quiet. Yes, I'm renting a room, she said softly, lowering her gaze to Sophia sleeping at her breast. James stepped closer, his blue eyes full of sincerity, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. I live alone in a service house on the outskirts of town. 3 rooms, a yard, everything you need. I thought. Sophia is still so weak, she needs her mother's milk. And you're so good with her. I'm not asking for much, just please help her until she gets stronger. His words tumbled out awkwardly, but there wasn't a hint of selfishness in them. Alice felt warmth spreading in her chest, mixed with fear. He was offering her a place in his home, as a wet nurse or nanny. Her thoughts tangled, but in his eyes, she saw only care, for Sophia, and for her too. After Matthew left her with an envelope of money and shattered dreams, this felt like a beam of light piercing the darkness. I'll think about it, she whispered. James nodded, gave a shy smile, and left, placing the chrysanthemums on her bedside table. Their sweet scent filled the room, but with it came tension. The other mothers exchanged looks, and Alice heard someone whisper, "Moving in with a stranger just like that? What will people say?" Alice accepted James's offer, but with one condition: she wasn't a nanny or servant, just a temporary guest until Sophia grew stronger. Moving into his house was a step into the unknown. The house was spacious, with a wooden porch that creaked underfoot, and a yard where apple trees bent under the weight of ripe fruit. Alice took a small room with a window overlooking endless fields where sunsets painted the sky crimson. There, she felt safe, though shadows of the past and people's judgment still haunted her. She and James shared the responsibilities of caring for the children. Alice nursed Ethan and Sophia, rocked them to sleep at night, while James cooked breakfast and played with them whenever he returned from duty. His quiet ways hid the pain of his wife's betrayal, but in everything he did, Alice saw the steady reliability she had always longed for in her life. She went back to teaching. Her Russian language and literature classes brought her confidence again. She spoke about Pushkin and Yesenin with such passion that her students, who at first tested her toughness, soon sat listening with bated breath. But outside the classroom, another world awaited her, a world of gossip and judgment. In Harpersville, where everyone knew each other, rumors spread faster than the wind. In the teacher's lounge, colleagues exchanged looks whenever Alice walked in. At the market, where she bought vegetables, old women shook their heads. So young, already with a baby, and now living with that officer. What kind of morals are these? Parents of her students shot her sideways glances when passing by. A single mother, not even married, and taking care of someone else's baby too. Where is this world going? They whispered. Even Grace, who had become her pillar of support, gently told her one day, "Don't pay them any mind, sweetheart. People talk because they have nothing better to do. Just stay strong." Alice tried to ignore it, but every whisper felt like a stab. She feared these rumors would reach the school principal, ending her probation period with dismissal. In the evenings, sitting in the yard with James, she shared her fears. He would wave them away, though worry flickered in his eyes. "Let them talk," he said as he poured tea. "What matters is that the kids are healthy." But his words couldn't silence her fear. Alice felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. One wrong step and she would lose everything, her job, her home, her fragile hope for a new life. The turning point came unexpectedly. The school was preparing for a parents' meeting, and Alice braced for the worst. She overheard colleagues whispering in the teacher's lounge. "She's so young, no husband, and now living with that officer. What kind of example is that for the children?" The principal hadn't said anything yet, but Alice felt his eyes on her. At the meeting, the parents seemed skeptical. One mother, a big woman wearing a bright floral scarf, spoke loudly. "How can we trust a teacher who lives like that? Our kids need a good example, not this." The room buzzed with murmurs, and Alice felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to respond, but her throat closed up. Just then, Grace appeared at the door. She rarely came to the school, but she had heard about the meeting and came to support Alice. Raising her hand for silence, she began to speak. "You're all judging her, but do you even know what Alice has done? She's not just raising her own son, she saved another woman's baby. The mother abandoned her newborn at the hospital, and Alice, with so little herself, fed that baby with her own milk. Isn't that the kind of example your children need?" The room fell silent. Parents glanced at each other, some lowering their eyes. Deborah Miller, who sat at the head of the table, slowly stood up. "I didn't know the whole story," she said, looking at Alice with new respect. "Why didn't you tell us? What you did was truly human, Alice." After the meeting, in the teacher's lounge, colleagues came up to Alice, some to apologize, some to offer warm words. An older math teacher took her hand. "You're amazing, dear. Don't listen to gossip. To those kids, both yours and that little girl, you're an angel." Alice held back tears. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just tolerated, but respected. The gossip didn't disappear, but now it carried a different tone, admiration for her strength and kindness. Evenings at James's house became warmer. She and James would sit in the garden, rocking Ethan and Sophia, their conversations growing more personal. James told her about his job and his dreams of a family that his wife's betrayal had destroyed. Alice shared the pain Matthew had left her with, and James listened silently, just gently squeezing her hand. "You're strong, Alice," he told her one night, gazing at the stars. "Not everyone could go through what you did." His words warmed her, though she still feared opening her heart. The gossip still stung, but the support from school and Grace gave her strength. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep, the garden filled with the scent of apple blossoms, James looked at her longer than usual. "Alice," he began, his voice trembling, "I don't really know how to say this, but I feel so happy when you're here. The kids do too." She stayed quiet, afraid to break the moment. In her heart, fear and hope wrestled with each other. Could she ever trust again? Alice and James were growing closer, their bond built on respect and care. The house was now filled with the laughter of Ethan and Sophia, who were growing like two flowers under the sun. Alice kept teaching, and her lessons no longer felt like just a job, they were a calling. Her students looked at her with admiration, and parents would bring her apples from their orchards as thanks. Then, one evening, James knelt down in the garden, holding a simple ring. "You're already Sophia's mom," he said, looking into her eyes. "And I want you to be my family. Forever." Alice burst into tears, but they were tears of joy. She nodded, and they hugged under the stars, feeling their wounds begin to heal. Grace, who had become like a mother to Alice, cried at their wedding. And Harpersville, which once judged her, now felt proud of their teacher. Their love was quiet but deep, like the sea beyond Harpersville's shores. Alice realized her kind decision had saved not just Sophia, but herself too, giving her the family she never dared to dream of. 6 years had passed since the day Alice, clutching her battered suitcase, stepped over James's threshold. Back then, she was alone and rejected. Now, standing on the porch of their house surrounded by apple trees, she looked out at Harpersville with a smile. The sea glimmered in the morning sun, and the air was filled with the scent of ripe fruit and salt. The life she once never dared to dream of had blossomed like the flowers in their garden. Ethan and Sophia grew up like two rays of sunshine, filling their home with laughter and endless energy. Ethan, a sturdy boy with a mischievous smile, loved running through the orchard, picking apples and building forts out of branches. Sophia, delicate with golden curls and eyes as blue as James's, was his shadow, always by his side, always ready to join in his adventures. They were inseparable, and when Alice watched them, her heart swelled with tenderness. Those two, her children, were the meaning of her life. James turned out to be more than just a husband. He was the rock she had never dared to hope for back when Caroline threw her out. He woke up early to make breakfast, simple meals, but made with such care that even scrambled eggs felt special. In the evenings, he told the kids stories about the sea, about life at the Coast Guard station, about the stars he knew by name. Sometimes, Alice would catch herself looking at him with the same love-struck gaze as in their early days. Their love was quiet but deep. Grace, who had become a second mother to Alice, came to visit every week. Her steps, a little shuffling but steady, echoed by the gate, and the kids would squeal with joy as they ran to greet Grandma Grace. She always brought baskets of homemade jam, apricot, plum, cherry, and settled into the gazebo wrapped in wild grapevines. Alice brewed mint tea, and they talked about everything, school, the kids, how fast time flew by. Watching Ethan and Sophia, Grace would shake her head and smile. "My, how your babies have grown, sweet Alice," she would say, adjusting her scarf. "I still remember you standing there with your suitcase, so lost. And look at you now, such a beautiful family. A real family." Alice smiled, but her throat tightened with emotion. She never forgot how Grace had reached out to her on the day the whole world seemed to turn away. Without her kindness, none of this home, the children's laughter, James's warmth, would have been possible. One September morning, when Ethan and Sophia walked off to school hand in hand for the first time, Alice stood by the gate unable to hold back her tears. Ethan, proud in his new uniform, carried his backpack confidently, while Sophia, with two little braids, held his hand tightly. They looked so grown up and so little at the same time. Alice watched them walk down the familiar road, the same road she once trudged along, not knowing where her fate would lead. At school, they were welcomed with warmth. Alice, now a respected teacher, was the pride of Harpersville. Her Russian and literature classes were loved by everyone, from the fifth graders who listened spellbound to Yesenin's poems, to the seniors who debated Dostoevsky's characters. Parents, who once whispered about her past, now brought her bouquets of flowers and thanked her for igniting a love of reading in their children. Alice's story, her kindness to Sophia, her strength in the face of judgment, spread through town and became a legend. Our Alice, people said, and there was pride in those words. Ethan and Sophia quickly became favorites at school. Ethan, with his unstoppable energy, was the life of his class, while Sophia, quiet but sharp-minded, amazed teachers with her essays. They never felt like outsiders because Alice and James raised them in love that made no difference between mine and yours. When classmates asked Sophia, "Why do you have a different last name?" she would smile and say, "Because my mom saved me, and my dad chose my name." No one ever dared tease her after that. That evening, after their first day of school, Alice and James sat on the porch watching the sunset. The kids were asleep, tired from the day, and the house was filled with a peaceful silence broken only by the distant sound of the sea. James took Alice's hand, his fingers warm and strong. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought I could be this happy. You gave me a family, Alice. For Sophia, for me." Alice leaned against his shoulder, feeling tears roll down her cheeks. She, an orphan who grew up without a mother's love, had built a home full of it. She thought of that girl standing at Caroline's gate, humiliated and lost, and realized that girl would never have believed in a future like this. But it was here, in Ethan's laughter, in Sophia's gentle hugs, in James's eyes, and in Grace's baskets of jam. "We built this together," she whispered, wiping her tears. "All of us, James." He smiled and kissed her temple. The sea whispered its timeless stories, and the stars above Harpersville shone brighter than ever. Alice knew that her life